Okay, so now when we go on to the next text, and I'll read out the first one. Sukha dukke same kritva labha labho jaya jayo tatto yudhaya yujyasva naivam papam avapsyasi. And then maybe we can have Bhumi Mataji. Bhumi Mataji has joined us. She's new, so yeah.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Yes, so Mataji, would you like to, do you have your Gita with you?
Yes, Prabhu, I do.
Would you be able to read out the English for text 38?
Yeah. So the purport or the translation?
The translation, please.
Okay. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so you shall never incur sin.
Yes. So now we are finding Krishna, he's coming back to some very esoteric stuff, right? This is no longer in the zone of well, if you're really good, you won't, you can go to the heavenly planets, right? Now we're finding a more elevated understanding. And if you see here, I remember I gave this to all of you. By the end of module 3, you will all, like, the yoga ladder is either your best friend or you've dropped out of the course. So you need to get to know the yoga ladder well. It is the whole message of the Bhagavad-gītā. Now, don't find it overwhelming to see all of those. Trust me, by the end, you'll find this graph to almost be too simplistic, right? It's so don't get scared by it. But this is very much something we're going to come back to again and again and again and again and again. It is such a recurring aspect of the structure and message of the Bhagavad-gītā. And we're now seeing very explicitly the first sort of transition for it because, and we will discuss a tiny bit, karma-kanda, right, is the basic level. We have animal life and then we have human life, right? Srila Prabhupada, he was once asked, there was this one guy, this one like scholar, right? And he was talking to Srila Prabhupada and he told Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, can you make me a Brahmin? And then Srila Prabhupada said, first, I must make you a human, and then I can make you a Brahmin. And so this we can find is the transition here, right? Animal life is unregulated, just doing whatever, How does an animal live, right? We can see they want to eat, and then they go eat, and then they want to sleep, and then they sleep. They want to mate, they mate, and then when they want to defend, I guess that only happens when they're being attacked, but then they definitely defend, right? There's no nuance to it, right? And we see lots of people are two-legged animals, right? They will just act like this, right? It's a very animalistic life. Now, that's not to say that we reduce the dignity of their humanity, but rather that they are not acknowledging all the potential and dignity that humanity entails, right? Sometimes people hear that and they'll think, oh, we're dehumanizing people. No, I would say that they've dehumanized themselves, unfortunately. But we still treat them with all the dignity, not that they deserve, but we there's a baseline still. As devotees, we are still nice to people, so to speak, and still Shastra enjoins that their lives are still worth more than animal lives. It's not this isn't some sort of condemnation. It's just a recognition of how much dignity they give themselves to their lives. Then we have karma-kanda. Right? Kanda means section. As we know, or as we will discuss further today, there are 3 different sections for the Vedic knowledge. This system, by the way, is developed by Ramanujacharya. Interestingly enough, Madhvacharya, he doesn't follow this system. But Ramanujacharya, he does, and that there's 3 sections of the Vedas. There's the karma-kanda, there's the jnana-kanda, and there's the upasana-kanda, or the bhakti-kanda. And these sections are all done for a different purpose, right? They're meant to give a different message. One is there to teach you how to experience karma, live your life, right? The other one is there to teach you knowledge, and the other one is there to teach you worship. Madhvacharya actually disagrees. He takes the opinion that all of it is to teach you worship, and that actually all of the names of Krishna, all of the names of the demigods listed are actually names of Krishna, which is interesting, right? But anyways, we tend to take Ramanujacharya's approach, although we can very much acknowledge and worship Madhvacharya's approach and implement it ourselves. And in that approach, we can say that there's a whole section which is there about how to live your life. Karma-kanda, as we can see here, it's about being, being a good person, right? I do the right thing. I take care of people. I do everything. This is human life, right? This is humanity, and it is good, but it is not spiritual life, right? It is good to do these things, right? But it is not, in the spiritual perspective, the best thing to do, right? So there we have karma-kanda, acting as a good person, doing your duties to society. Interesting how secular sorts never get over, and that's exactly the point, right? So secular sorts, right, they're doing a good thing when they engage in karma-kanda, right? We can think of, all of the great, exactly, right? This is the big critique. People will say, all these temples, let's burn them down and sell everything in them and give all that money to the poor. And don't get me wrong, giving stuff to the poor is not a bad thing, right? But it's not acknowledging the fullness of reality. That's very much, that's how do I put it? That's the attitude of the karma-kandi divorced from the shastric revelations regarding karma-kanda, right? Other aspects of karma-kanda are like, we will see people, they'll come to the temple and they'll give money, they'll give some donations to the temple, right? Not really, so that they can do well on their math exam, so that their favorite cricket team can win, stuff like this, right? Karma-kanda, right? This is karma-kanda, right? Even though they're coming to the temple, even though they're giving stuff, and that's nothing to be dismissed or discouraged, right? But it's definitely not the highest conception, right? And as we'll find Krishna later speaks in this section, he speaks rather heavily. What are these sections? What are these attitudes? They are flowery words that are forests of ignorance. So we shouldn't think just because we shouldn't discourage people doing this, because why should we discourage somebody doing something that's good? We also shouldn't think that we should encourage it for ourselves, right? There is something much beyond that. And what is beyond that? There is karma yoga, right? And so karma yoga is very much, karma yoga is acting now. You're doing these actions. You're doing the actions of karma-kanda. You're doing the right thing, but there's two varieties. There's sakarma, karma yoga, and we'll get into this more. And there's nishkama karma yoga. Sakama means there is some desire there, right? So you're doing these things because ultimately you still have that desire, right? You want to be a good person, do the right thing, right? And therefore people look at you and they say, oh, wow, what a good person. And you get all of that reward. You get to feel like, wow, I'm such a good person, right? You get to think, oh, when I die, I can die peacefully because in my next life, I'll be rewarded for being a good person like this, right? You can do all of these things, and that's karma-kanda. Sakama, karma yoga, however, is saying, yes, I will do all of these things. I'm very attached to my material existence. And that's fine to be attached to your material existence. I mean, it's not fine, but it's not something to be shamed about because most of us are still attached, right, to our material existence, right? So, but you say, okay, I'm going to give one section of what I get from my material activities, and I'm going to offer, yeah, you got to start where you are, exactly, as Mrugank said. I'm going to give one section of this to Krishna, right? I have some goal. I'm going to sacrifice one section of this. Or you can just say, I'm going to be detached from one section. There's two approaches, right? There is devotional karma yoga, and there's non-devotional karma yoga, right? Devotional means you're offering it up to Krishna, right? So you're working, you have your career, and then you're saying, well, I'm going to give, 50% of my income to Krishna. You might say 50%, that's a huge number. But in Srimad Bhagavatam, that's actually the number Prabhupada gives. Prabhupada says 50% of your income should be given to Krishna if you're practicing this path. He's not saying that every person must by law give this amount of money, but if you are thinking of practicing like this, it is not a small number that you're giving, right? Anything less is pretty much just karma-kanda then, right? So there's that. So that's with some mixed into it. And all of these things are good to a degree, right? Karma-kanda, when executed according to varnashram, according to your duty to society, it teaches you things, right? It teaches you faith in Vedic society, right? Because you're involved in Vedic society, right? You're involved in doing your duty in terms of Vedic terms, and you think, wow, this is a really effective way to execute my duty in life, right? Furthermore, it also teaches you some degree of renunciation, because even when you're being a good person, you are learning how to not think about yourself, right? Remember, what was that first point I made about when we were talking about the introduction? If you take one thing away from the introduction, you should take away this. Who can remember? What was that point I was making? And I said the story about the long spoons.
Helping each other, serving.
Serving, right? That is the main message of Bhagavad-gītā. Not that we learn to stop taking, that we learn to stop seeing things and saying, I will enjoy this. And we start learning to say, oh, well, I will begin to serve, right? I will see Krishna, and rather than seeing Krishna and the material world as something that I can take for my own enjoyment, we can see the material world in Krishna, and we can say, now this material world which I'm in is something I can serve towards Krishna, and therefore also serve everyone else, right? It is about transforming greed into service and doing the right thing, being a good person. These things help us learn that, right? Because you start thinking, right? I have to sacrifice my money, right? So I'm not thinking, I've got my money and I'm using it for myself, right? But you're sacrificing it to use it for yourself in the long term, right? So it's not very elevated, but it still is somehow elevating, right? Instead of using it for yourself right now, you learn to sacrifice to enjoy later on, right? Because as I'm pretty sure it was John Locke or Thomas Hobbes said, everyone is ultimately selfish. People do charity out of extended selfishness, which is harsh to hear, right? But it's true. People do it because they like that feeling that I'm a good person. They like the feeling that if I do good things, well, then things will be fairer for me, right? But still, it teaches you to sacrifice, at least for delayed sense gratification. Then we can go again to that higher level, where it's sacrificed in a detached sense. I'm just sacrificing this and I'm letting go of this. I'm not attached to the fruits of the action. I'm doing it, the action, but I'm not attached to the results of the action, and I'm letting go, right? I'm letting go altogether. I don't want it to come around back to me. There is a question. Yes, so Alex brings up a good point, and I was going to come to it at the end of the yoga ladder, but I'll bring it up now because if it's on Alex's mind, I'm sure it's on everyone else's mind. People will misread this so often, and they'll say, therefore, we can be heartless, and we should be heartless, right? Spiritual life is being heartless to the homeless person you see on the street, right? You see a homeless person and you say, I'm not a karma-kanda, I'm a bhakti yogi, and then you run away, you know? You say Hare Krishna and you run away, right? You don't do anything. This is maybe a misreading of what's going on here. And it's not just maybe a misreading of what's going on here, it is a misreading. Srila Bhakti-siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he was there with his Grihastha disciples once, and there was some beggar begging, and they all refused to give him any money. And Srila Bhakti-siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he said, what is the point of practicing all of this devotion if your hearts are still so hard? Bhakti yoga should soften our hearts. We should feel compassion. And it's not wrong to give money to a homeless person on the street, right? That is not some violation. The issue is seeing this as the goal, right? The issue is it is rather that our compassion should flow from our bhakti, right? Because otherwise, if we do welfare for welfare's sake, it flows merely from our extended material sense gratification, right? And also, furthermore, it doesn't solve much, right? It solves something, right? You give a hungry person a meal, they won't be hungry for the rest of the day, right? And that is a victory. Again, we are not condemning karma-kanda. We are not condemning doing the good thing. What we are saying is that there is something beyond the body. What has Krishna just spent the whole last section of the Bhagavad-gītā establishing? There is something beyond the body, and that is eternal. And caring to that provides eternal results, as we will get to as we get deeper into this section of the Bhagavad-gītā, right? So if there is that, then higher than that welfare, again, not that it's taboo. Often, I think, I saw this once, right? I saw one devotee and we were going through, and there was some beggars, and then he didn't give them money, and he said, I won't give them the money because I give all my money to Krishna, right? And I was thinking, you watch movies, right? So you're spending that money going to the cinema and watching movies, right? And I'm not judging him for that. Do what you want, right? But if you're saving that money, right, not giving it to beggars, but then spending it on fine dining, going to a nice, NOG vegetarian restaurant, right? Instead, well, maybe then you're not saving it all for Krishna, and maybe then it would have been better to give that money to the beggar, right? If you're saying, oh, I'm a devotee, I won't give money to the beggar, and then you go and spend that money on a movie, then maybe it was probably better that you gave the money to the beggar, right? Do you get the point that I'm making? People will say this, and then they're not on that platform, and then they'll go ahead and you get what I'm saying, right? They'll use it for their sense gratification. Often people will use this as an excuse, but it's not, especially if one is a grihastha, right? If money as charity is misused, yeah, absolutely. If money as charity is misused, and money as charity is often misused, right? Money is often said to be the worst charity. Food is a much better charity because it's much harder to transform money into food into misuse, right? There's only really one use for food, right? So yeah, the point is there, but I think maybe a hint off topic to get into. But yeah, we can't guarantee it's used for a good purpose, the money, that is correct. But on the other hand, we shouldn't go to the other extreme and have that cold heart, right? Because honestly, if you say, well, that money will be misused, I feel like 90% of people who say, oh, that money will be misused, go ahead and misuse the money themselves. As I say, often this can be used as an excuse to just be hard-hearted and very much achieve the opposite of the point of bhakti. If that makes sense, right? How many people are using money correctly? If we take the broadest, not just people using an excuse, but just the world in general, it's 99% of the world is misusing their money, right? To some degree. Yep. So then we have karma yoga. And then, just give me half a second. So then we have these higher yogas, and we won't get into them too much because I want to get to our activity, and then I want to discuss a little bit more about this chapter, okay? These higher ones, as we get through, we will come back in, as I said, the yoga ladder again and again and again. Surrender Unto Me is a great name for Purijan Prabhu's authoritative study guide for the Bhagavad-gītā. But if he was going back to the drawing board and asked for other names, I would without a doubt propose Climbing the Yoga Ladder is another name for studying the Bhagavad-gītā. We will be climbing the yoga ladder in discussion. Now, so there's the two things. There's sakama karma yoga and there's nishkama karma yoga. Sakama, you have that desire, and so you're giving a bit of it away. And then there's nishkama karma yoga, right? And that's when you have no desires. And again, that can be expressed in two ways. Either you're fully detached, right? Or you're fully detached and you're offering it to Krishna. And in that second case, it becomes something very special. It starts becoming bhakti, right? Nishkama karma yoga isn't necessarily bhakti, but when it is all offered for Krishna, it very much is. Now, see, that's why we had to have no activities last week. That's how far back behind we were, that the questions were actually at this point in the presentation. So, and then we come to Nishkama Karma Yoga, which is often called Buddhi Yoga. And we're going to have our activity. I'm just going to read the next text. And this activity, I'm sorry, is going to be a bit of an intense one, okay? It's not going to be a relaxed one like they normally are, or at least that I find they normally are. So, we find in text 38, now what's happened? Krishna, he has discussed jnana, right? That's the first thing he discussed. I've whited them out because they have to do with the activity, right? When I give you the slides, I will unwhite out that section says which slokas are being discussed. He's discussed jnana, and then he's discussed karma, right? He's discussed doing the right thing, right? Karma-kanda, right? Just being a good person, right? He's discussed that aspect, right? Now in text 38, he's come and he's joined the two together, right? Jnana has detachment, right? Jnana is very detached. And I'm sure we all felt that. It was almost brutally detached, right? When he's talking about, you're not this body, simply the soul passes from this body to the next, right? Very detached. Karma, on the other hand, is very embodied, right? You could hear all of that and almost not believe in the eternal soul, right? You could have heard most of the karma section and believed that. Now we find nishkama karma yoga or buddhi yoga, right? And we find it described. And how is it enacted? It is enacted as a mixture of jnana and karma, in that it is embodied. Krishna is not saying, forget your identity, forget everything, right? Krishna is saying, now fight, right? But fight for the sake of fighting, fight in a detached way. Remove yourself from happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. And by doing so, you shall never incur sin, right? Because you have detached yourself from the fruits of your actions. Now we find there is a synthesis, right? There is a synthesis. We can say the thesis is jnana, the antithesis is karma, and together we find buddhi yoga. So Krishna, he is joining the two together. Now we're going to have our activity. It'll be a 10-minute activity, one of the longer ones, because I want you to go through from the beginning. And I'm saying from the beginning, I mean, from text 11, right? From text 11 up until text 53, I'm pretty sure. So that whole thing, no need to read the purports necessarily, read them for clarification. And I want you to try to categorize which text is referring to which aspect, right? So if you can come together and just write a list, right? Which ones are speaking mainly describing karma yoga, as in karma-kanda, right? Be a good person, do the right things. Which ones are talking about jnana yoga, which is this very detached, right? Sit down and realize the truth of everything, right? Sankhya, as we will discuss after the activity. And then which ones are just, and nishkama karma yoga, you can also talk about. It'll be hard distinguishing it from karma-kanda, right? But maybe you can try and argue it. I personally don't think they're very distinct, right? I think because they're internal, right? These are internal realities, and Krishna, he's describing the external expression, right? So I don't think they're too distinct, but if you feel like there's a distinction, please, I would love to learn from all of you. And then come to which texts seem to be describing nishkama karma yoga. So do your activities, but renounce the fruits. And another interesting point, and you might say, well, how do we distinguish this? But also, if you can think that maybe there's some texts which are talking about nishkama karma yoga or bhakti yoga, and there's evidence for them talking about one or the other, because they both seem similar, right? Be detached from everything, except one of them is offering it to Krishna and one of them is not necessarily offering them to Krishna. If you find any evidence, and I would be really impressed if you do, I'm not expecting this, for some referring directly to bhakti and some referring theoretically to either one of them, then present it. There is some evidence there. But again, that's like cherry on the top bonus marks. Main thing is, please go through these and now try with this vision, analyze which one falls into any of these three categories. 3 or 4 categories, if you're gunning for those bonus marks. I'm going to make the breakout rooms now, and then how big? I think I'll make groups. I'll make 3 groups. What do you reckon? I reckon 3 groups. Just because it's a difficult activity, you'll all need to chip in a bit, right? Okay, I'll open the rooms. Okay, oh wait 1 second. I'm closing all the rooms. I'm going to change the time limit to 10 minutes. Okay, I'll see you all in 10 minutes. Because when you get an understanding of how this text is distinguished, you really get to start perceiving the yoga ladder everywhere, right? Like it's throughout the text. And once you start practicing that, you'll see that Krishna, he's not crazy, right? He's not saying all these different things. He's saying the same thing, but he's speaking at different levels. Again, I think somebody's unmuted. I'm sorry to be that guy, just throws me up every time. There we go. Yeah, so we can see that. And I hope we all had that experience, right? That as you go through, you can, you start feeling in your mind, you're seeing all of the different ways that Krishna is speaking. Did anyone get past jnana? Did anyone get into, because of course 11 till 30 is pretty much jnana, right? Did anyone get into the karma section?
Not really, Prabhuji. We are just completing that, entering into that section.
Prabhu, we rushed it through. We basically, what we found 11 to 30 was Gyan Yoga, with except number 26. We think number 26 was karma-kanda, and then 39 to 48 was karma yoga.
Yeah.
And then 49 to 53 was nishkam karma, buddhi yoga.
Yeah. Interesting. Nice. We'll go through what I think when we read the texts, right? Yeah. So then, yeah, I'm curious how you all break it down.
Would 15 be Nishkarma, Prabhu?
15, let me look. I'm trying to have a look.
Yeah, that's what we were thinking as well. Most of them were jnana, at least up to 17, but then 15 was a bit, we were talking about it potentially being nishkama.
15?
Yeah.
Yeah.
15, I think I would read it as jnana, but I see how you can see nishkama in there. Again, how do I put it? Even though we are teaching as hard and fast categories, they do bleed into each other. And that's going to be a main theme towards the end. If more of you would have gotten towards the end. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to reform breakout rooms because I really do think it's important, but I'm going to just make the scope now just so you can look at the final set of them, right? And really look at them in details, because the final set of them are really, they really push and pull back, right? You'll find different aspects of them. So yeah, so we'll just do quick breakout rooms for 5 minutes. I'm just not going to put a timer on and break it manually. So I've learned my lesson with timers. And yeah, if we can just discuss texts, let's say text 38 onwards.
Okay.
No. Let's do text 30 to text 30 on. Just the two karma sections. I just want you to distinguish between the two of them. Where do they begin? Where do they end with those aspects? Okay.
30 to which text, Prabhu?
30 to 52, I think. Isn't that when the Sthita Pragya?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Okay. Too easy. So I'll do another set of breakout rooms because yeah, and we'll just, based on what all the groups have discussed, you can go in and just focus on that. And here we go. Very nice feeling. I've turned off the thing. Oh, here we go. I put you all in the same rooms. It saved the layout. Okay, so you can all just go back and keep on working on it. I hope that got everyone thinking about the different categories. I hope that got everyone processing them. Hopefully there was debate over what is what. Yeah, so I think we'll conclude on that activity for today. Homework for next week is either homework. I'm going to send a PDF into the WhatsApp group, and it's a pretty thorough explanation of the yoga ladder. I don't expect you all to memorize it and master it. Just read it so that you really start getting exposed to these sort of things. So I'm going to send it. It's written by Romapad Swami Maharaj from America. And it's a little booklet. It's like 10-15 pages long, if I remember correctly. That'll be the reading for this week. On top of that, I would just start, maybe go reread through that section, right? 22 to whatever, and just keep going through now until we start chapter 3 and try see how the different things are there, the different aspects of the yoga ladder are there, right? So for the homework, read that booklet And then if you have leftover time, start reading the chapter, and definitely next week, then reread those sections of the chapter, breaking down, oh, this is where this is where that, I can see this coming out here. And know that you can see things. All of the study guides are like simplifications of it. You might see aspects of something coming out in this part and that part. Try and see, you know, where you can see it. Try and think, think deeply about it. Now it's time that we're not just passively reading. We should try to digest and really interpret the text. Yeah, I hope, so that's the homework. Just some comments. In general, we can see what is bhakti because it is described, some parts it's described as being beyond the 3 modes of material nature. Karma, all of karma is within the 3 modes of material nature, right? All of karma is within the 3 modes of material nature. So therefore, if he's describing activity which is transcending it, that can only be bhakti, because only bhakti transcends material nature. Nishkama karma yoga, which is just detachment from works without bhakti, is merely being detached, but it's not transcending. It's not activity situated beyond it, right? So there we can start seeing hints of bhakti and not just pure nishkama karma yoga. Yeah, so if that makes sense, are there any questions? You're free to leave if there aren't, and then we'll just continue discussing
Alex
next.
had one.
Oh, Alex had one. Yes, Alex.
Prabhu, can you re-explain the nishkam karma? I think the one karma one you explained, that's all within the 3 modes of nature, and anything above that is bhakti. But the nishkam, if you could re-clarify that part.
So nishkama is just renouncing the fruits of the activities, but the activities themselves are still in the 3 modes. You get what I mean? You're in one sense, you're transcending them because you're transcending the reactions. You're not acting within them. You're realizing you're not them, but it's still activity like that. Whereas bhakti is activity that is fully transcendental, right? There is no, yeah. Does that make sense? Shri Mataji?
Hare Krishna, yes. I was just wondering, it might be like slightly off topic, but still related to karma. I was just wondering, like, what's the interplay between karma and like prayers? Like, for instance, if it's in someone's karma to have like bad health, but then somebody's praying for them to have good health. And then also how karma and like the evil eye kind of interact. Yeah.
Yeah. The evil eye, I think, is interesting. It's originally an Arabian idea, if I remember correctly. I think it came through the influence of Arabian traders. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just interesting how these ideas have their roots all over the world. So questions like that, it really depends on the nature of the prayers. We can think that some prayers are done just to generate good karma, right? So some prayers are done in that platform. To counteract the bad karma, I'm going to generate some good karma, right? And that's what the majority of prayers are, right? I'm going to do, I'm going to say this, I'm going to do this as a pious activity, I'll get my pious reactions. However, devotees ideally, when they pray, they're not praying for anything, right? They're not praying for any good karma or bad karma, right? We know Queen Kunti, she prays for more suffering, not less suffering, right? She prays for more of it because the more suffering is there, the more she has opportunity to see the Lord. Those prayers actually are much more effective because they destroy both good karma and bad karma, right? They destroy both of them. Prabhupada would say when his disciples would get their palms read, right? They would have palm readings, and Prabhupada would say every time you clap your hand in the kirtan, your palm reading changes. To make that point, right? So it depends what you mean by prayers. If you mean the general pious prayers, then yeah, there'll be some good karma, and that might help you, balance out the bad karma that you're, paying off, right? Have some good after the bad. But for devotees, that's not really the concern. For devotees, the concern is my prayers are purely, I just want to see Krishna, right? That is the only concern of my prayer. And my prayer is only to worship Krishna and to have more opportunity to worship him, right? And with those prayers, though, because they transcend, as we've discussed, they transcend the 3 modes. Therefore, they just completely destroy any karma because karma is based on the 3 modes. Did that answer your question, or did I miss it?
No, it makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for today? If not, we'll wrap up.
I got one.
Oh, yeah.
I asked it in the chat before. Are there different caste hierarchies for men and women, or is it possible to have like a female kshatriya
yeah, so that's a debate contested point. You'll find both perspectives. I'm still unsure exactly which perspective I take on that, but you'll find both. Some will argue that women compose a varna in of themselves, in a sense, and others will argue that they sort of correlate to their masculine alternatives. I tend to lean towards the latter, right? I tend to lean towards the idea that women just do fit in their own way, but I haven't looked into it deeply enough, and I do know both perspectives are there from respectable scholars. So it's not something I want to throw out a quick opinion on, right? Until I've done more of the reading on it. Sorry to give such a diplomatic seeming answer, but it's not diplomatic. It genuinely is my thoughts. Even behind closed doors, that's exactly what I'd say. Yes, Sri Mataji?
Yes, sorry, just one more question.
Yeah.
I don't really know that much about like Mayavadi philosophy apart from what we went through like in class earlier.
No.
Yeah, okay.
No,
but wondering like why would Mayavadis believe what the Gita says, like when we use like the Gita's points to kind of refute their own theory or what they're saying, like why would they accept its authority?
So I think that's, you can have such complex answers to that, right? Like there's so many factors going into it. One thing is that they hold that there's a few statements in the Upanishads which are more authoritative than everything else, and everything else should be read in light of those statements. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, I think, pretty clearly just said, well, there's no reason why we should think that, right? He said, where is this ever stated that these statements should be given more authority? So they'll take these statements, which are like Tattvamasi, thou art that, aham brahmasmi, I am Brahman. And then they'll have their reading of it, and then they'll say, well, we interpret everything else in light of those readings. Again, it gets more complicated. They will present their long arguments why. And the reason why they read it like that, though, from our perspective, is of course that Shankaracharya was Shiva, and he was there to establish some Buddhistic type philosophy, right? And it's hard to actually get a full impersonalist philosophy out of the Gita. So he sort of, he gives primacy to those texts, and then says, well, let's read it in light of that in order to fulfill his purpose, right? Which is establishing the authority of the Vedas. That's how we understand it. But then as for them, if you talk to the average one, they're not compelled shastrically, if you get what I mean. They're compelled logically. And then they take their logical perspectives and they apply it to Shastra. You can psychologize all of the reasons why they find that attractive, but I think it'll be unique to each person. But how did they start doing it? Well, they started doing it because it was Shankaracharya's preaching strategy. Why did he do that as a preaching strategy? Because he wanted to make inroads in a Buddhist community. There's that nice quote section on the wiki. Wikipedia, by the way, is a terrible pramana. And not that Alex was recommending it, but a lot of the stuff on there, the person who wrote it clearly didn't know what they're talking about. But so why? Because he's making inroads in Buddhist society, and he's establishing Vedic authority, and then and then they do that, and they have a different way of a hierarchy. And then most of them, again, they're encouraged. Honestly, the average Mayavadi you meet on the street is a Mayavadi because it sounds cool. Like, and I'm not saying that too dismissively, but it is what it is, right? They're not a Mayavadi because they study the Bhagavad-gītā. They're a Mayavadi because they're like, whoa, I'm God, whoa, right? Or because of the popularity that Shankaracharya's thought had, because again, he was Shiva, he did do a good job, right? Because of that popularity, people then have those assumptions which they carry to the text, which is another thing that we should all be careful of, what assumptions we bring to the text. That's my short answer to that could be very, very long.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll wrap up. Okay, I think we'll wrap up then. I'll send the booklet that you all need to read in order to get a grasp of the yoga ladder. And then I will see you all I'll see you all in next week, and we will conclude our discussion of Nishkama Karma Yoga, and then we will begin the Sthita Pragya. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, one last one.
Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Prabhu, will the class continue during the last week of December, or will we take a break?
I'm thinking we'll take a break over any time that's a public holiday, was my plan, because I know people on public holidays are always busy. So my plan was whenever there's a public holiday weekend, we will take a break then. That's going to be my approach. So in Christmas, we'll have a break. Christmas public holiday, and then that's a good question. Actually, I should have brought that up earlier. And then I don't know when New Year's falls this year, but if New Year's Day is near the weekend, then we also won't have a class then, right?
Saturday, the New Year's Day, New Year's Eve is Friday.
In that case, I think we no, in that case, we'll take a break as well, because people might go somewhere for the public holiday on the weekend. So yeah, so New Year's and Christmas we'll have a break then. If the public holiday in any way is affecting the weekend, then yeah, we will. Yeah, because then it just becomes a pickle for everyone. Half the class won't be here because they're surfing in Hawaii or whatever. Then yeah. Okay, so we'll do that. We'll lock that in. Yep. So New Year's and Christmas, no class.
Okay.
Okay then. Okay. Hare Krishna. Have a good day,
Hare
everyone.
Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so
Hare
much.
Krishna.